This is a really crazy story. Everything that happens, you think, what's going on? It's completely bewildering. My name is Kate Summerscale, and I wrote The Haunting of Alma Fielding.
Kate Summerscale tells the true story of a woman who may have been haunted by a poltergeist.
Well, it was one Friday night in February 1938 that Alma Fielding was in bed with her husband Les in a working class suburb of South London. She and Les apparently witnessed this bizarre poltergeist activity, objects flying across the room like glass tumblers, light bulbs. And when her 16-year-old son, Don, came to the door to see what was going on because of all the clatter and shrieking, things were thrown at them as well, a sort of pot of face cream, some coins. The whole family was very scared. And when the events continued the next morning in the kitchen, eggs flew around and so on, Alma telephoned a Sunday newspaper that was running a series on the supernormal, as it was then called, and invited the journalists to come and see for themselves what was going on in her house. She was terrified.
Word of the haunting made its way to a man named Nandor Fodor.
He was a Hungarian Jewish refugee in London who worked for the International Society for Psychical Research. He believed in ghosts, but he hadn't yet been able to categorically pin down the truth of them. And he thought this sounded like a really plausible case. And so he hurried down to see if he could get any evidence for himself of these supernatural happenings. Well, he went down with a couple of colleagues, and all of them independently saw different things happen, which, when collated, seemed good evidence that something genuinely weird was going on. Wine glasses spring out of Alma's hands and shatter in mid-air, even hit the light fixture in the ceiling. A saucer that had been used to feed the cat fly across the room when Alma's back was turned, and there was absolutely no way she could have thrown it, and shatter against the back door. A vase apparently transported independently from one room to another. They were very excited, as well as slightly chilled by what was happening there. They wanted to discover proof of the supernatural, but equally they didn't want to be taken for fools, and they were wise to a lot of the tricks that mediums and others deployed in impersonating supernatural events. So they were looking out for things like strings and wires and misdirection and sleight of hand, the tricks that the conjurers on the London stage were also using at the time. They invited Alma to come into the International Institute for Psychical Research in South Kensington to see if the poltergeist energies would follow her there. To their great delight and amazement, they did, but they took new forms. So when Alma paraded around the seance room in the presence and under observation from all the researchers, she apparently materialized from thin air small objects. Pieces of jewelry, odd little items from her home seemed to have followed her and materialized, and increasingly sort of more ancient objects like little terracotta pots, and eventually even live creatures, a mouse, a bird, a terrapin.
It all seemed too good or too eerie to be true.
Fodor became increasingly suspicious. This went on for some time, many weeks. Things got weirder and weirder in terms of the experiences she was reporting, but Fodor saw a couple of moments at which he thought he saw her cheating. He saw what could have been trickery and sleights of hand. And eventually he decided that to establish once and for all whether she was for real or not as a psychic, he kind of half-tricked her into submitting to an X-ray on a portable machine in their offices. And on the X-ray, he found evidence that she did have objects concealed in her body. Therefore, at least some of the phenomena were fraudulent.
Fodor thought there might be a psychological explanation for Alma's experience.
Fodor deciding, under the influence of ideas he'd read from Sigmund Freud and other psychoanalysts, that what was really going on with Alma, both in terms of her fraudulence and her genuine terror, was that she was expressing repressed trauma, and that a traumatic event had occurred in her childhood, which she had forgotten, and that was emerging in the form of these phenomena and this sort of acting out and storytelling. But when the other members of the International Institute for Psychical Research got wind of his theories and where he was going with it, he started, in effect, conducting a kind of psychoanalysis on Alma. They were very freaked out by this and thought it was very disrespectful of the spiritualist beliefs of many people in the Institute, and also just dangerously sort of sexual and weird, and generally would discredit the institution. So he was expelled from the Institute. He, having been their chief research officer, chief ghost hunter, he was turfed out, and the investigation into Alma was abruptly ended.
And that was the end of Alma's haunting story.
After this, Fodor, to his delight, managed to get some endorsement for his theories from Freud himself, who had turned up in London that year. And then Fodor left London, left England, and went and established himself in New York and forged a new career as a psychoanalyst.
Fodor died in 1964. Alma Fielding eventually moved to the countryside, where she occasionally held seances. She died in 1976. So, was she actually haunted by a poltergeist? Summerscale says it's not necessarily an easy question to answer.
A lot of supernatural experience was a way for these women, in any case, of expressing traumatic experience, expressing things for which there was no language at the time. Almost like a performance artist, her supernatural experience was telling something about her inner life that was not accommodated by the society in which she found herself, or the life she found herself living as an ordinary housewife in a working class home in South London. So haunting as a form of self-expression and of expression of stories for which a culture or society doesn't yet have a language.